this meeting to order. Je déclare la...
I call this meeting to order.
Welcome to the 13th meeting of the House of Commons Special Committee on the COVID-19 pandemic.
This will be a hybrid meeting. Some members will be participating via video conference, and some will be participating in person.
Sure that those joining the media via video conference can be seen and heard by those in the chamber. 2 screens have been set up on either side of the Speaker's chair, and members in the chamber can listen to the floor audio or to interpretation using the earpieces at their desks. Je vous prie that...
Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name, and please direct your remarks through the chair.
For those joining via video conference, I would like to remind you to leave your mic on mute. Can you wait for the point of order until we finish the introduction? Or is there
so much noise in the background out there, Mr. Speaker?
Okay, that is a very good point of order. I want to remind everyone that when you do speak, it does actually pick up. We have amazing speakers, or no, amazing speaker, but that's a whole other story. Amazing microphones in the chamber, and they do pick up everything. So I know there was some chatter going on in the background. I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. I'm sorry that Mr. Ziad, that was a very good point of order. Appreciate that. For those joining us via video conference, I would like to remind you to leave your mics on mute when you're not speaking. Also, please note that if you want to speak in English, you should be on the English channel, and if you want to speak in French, you should be on the French channel. And should you wish to alternate between the 2 languages, you should change the channel to the language that you're speaking each time you switch languages.
Should members participating by video conference need to request the floor outside their designated speaking times, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. Those in the chamber can rise in the usual way. Please note that today's proceedings will be televised.
Next one, I understand, is that there are no ministerial announcements for today, so we'll continue on to presentations of petitions for a period not exceeding 15 minutes.
I would like to remind members that any petition presented during a meeting of the special committee must have already been certified by the Clerk of Petitions. For members participating in person, we ask that they please come and drop off the signed certificate off at the table once the petition is presented.
Now, the first petition goes to Mr. Manley. Mr. Manley, who's joining us via video conference.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a petition that calls on the government to deal with the helping our honeybees. So they're crucial to our food system. They provide hundreds of billions of dollars worth of services to commercial agricultural crops and other ecological services every year. And the European Union has put heavy restrictions on chemicals that are affecting them, the neonicotinoids. And this petition calls on the Government of Canada, for the sake of bees and our food security, to follow Europe's lead and adhere to the precautionary principle by banning the use of neonicotinoids in Canada. Thank you.
The next presenter of petitions will be Mr. Genuis, who is very parliamentary dressed from the waist up, I understand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that's all you need to see for the moment. Canadians are horrified by the military report on the conditions of long-term care in Ontario, which raises big questions about the choices facing seniors in certain situations, which is what makes this first petition particularly timely. I'm tabling a petition related to C7, the government's euthanasia bill, which seeks to dramatically remove safeguards which the government said were vital only a short time ago. When some people are living in deplorable conditions, you can't truly speak of them having a choice when they ought to die. So I, in light of especially that new information, commend this petition to the consideration of members of the House. The second petition is in support of Bill S-204 on organ harvesting and trafficking, put forward in the Senate. The bill would make it a criminal offense for a person to go abroad and receive an organ without consent. This seeks to combat the horrific practice of forced organ harvesting and trafficking. Thank you.
And the next petition presenter will be Ms. May. Ms. May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and greetings from Saanich, Gulf Islands. The petition I'm presenting today is e-petition 2509 and has been duly certified. It relates to what I think many of us will regard as the real heroes of the last few months. In this pandemic, it's been often very underpaid and overworked frontline workers who receive something less than minimum wage, or minimum wage and nothing more, and who are, of course, deemed essential services. Petitioners have asked Parliament and government to increase, as a temporary measure, a wage supplement to bring the wages for those who are in contact with the general public and working in what has been deemed an essential service to receive on a temporary basis no less than $20 an hour in light of the service and the risks they're taking for all of us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
A point of order, Ms. Harder.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member who just spoke brought up a great point yesterday, and she said that when we present petitions, we are simply supposed to give one or two sentences before putting them on the table. I believe that was more than one or two sentences.
I want to remind the honourable members that when presenting petitions, be very concise and precise with your précis that you give up front, as opposed to going on for a long time. But right now, we'll move on to proceeding to statements by members for a period not exceeding 15 minutes, and each statement will be for 1 minute. We now start off with Mr. Fonseca. Mr. Fonseca.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I'm honored to recognize the youth in my riding of Mississauga East Cooksville that are part of the 52nd Mississauga Scouts. For over a decade, I've had the great opportunity to join Scouts every year during the month of May for the door-to-door food drives. This year's been a lot different owing to the COVID situation. But our Scouts are not used to saying the word impossible. David Chant, head leader for their Cub Pack, reached out to share that the youth have found innovative ways to engage our community through a virtual food bank. A big thank you to the Scout leaders like David that are strong role models for our youth, teaching them the importance of leadership, kindness, and giving back. I've always been amazed with the support within our community for the Scouts Food Drive. David and his group of Scouts raised over $46,000 of food last year for the Mississauga Food Bank and Compass. Again, a huge virtual high five to all our young Scouts that have taken the lead with lots of compassion and care. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We'll now go on to Mr. Richards. Mr. Richards.
May 24th to 31st is Tourism Week in Canada. This annual celebration is a time for us to recognize the contributions and the experiences of Canada's tourism industry. C'est une industrie très importante et cette année.
This industry is very important, and this year it will be particularly so.
The ongoing coronavirus crisis has closed provincial and international borders to recreational travel, and tourism operators from coast to coast have been among the first and hardest hit due to the government-mandated lockdowns. Clear criteria regarding border reopening and health and safety requirements will allow hospitality and tourism businesses to sufficiently prepare to reopen. This includes rehiring employees, ordering supplies, putting together tour packages and marketing plans. And operators do not need to be set back any further because of a lack of clarity around reopening. While this Tourism Week is not a celebration like we had expected, I anticipate next year's celebration to be a celebration of an even stronger and more successful tourism industry in Canada. The 1.8 million Canadians whose jobs depend on a thriving tourism sector are counting on it. Bon semaine de tourisme.
I'll go on to Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Speaker, Monday was a sad day in my riding of Bonavista, Burin, Trinity, and indeed our entire province. Please join me as I offer sincere condolences to the families of the men who lost their lives at sea in a tragic accident off the coast of St. Lawrence in Placentia Bay. Ed Norman, his son Scott Norman, and his nephew Jody Norman all tragically lost their lives while fishing for crab this past Monday. A fourth man and family friend, Isaac Kittle, was also with them, and after a courageous search mission by the Canadian Coast Guard, auxiliary members, and the Department of National Defence and Provincial Airlines is unfortunately still missing. We grieve with the entire town of St. Lawrence as they mourn this tragic loss of life. Mr. Speaker, I am sure the entire province of Newfoundland and Labrador, this parliamentary family, and Canadians from coast to coast to coast join me in thinking of these men along with their friends and family, during this difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now we're going to continue with Mr. Simard. Mr. Simard. Thank you, Chair. Today, I would like to talk to you about a very strong man who unfortunately left us on May 25th. We learned with great sorrow that Mr. Francis Dufour had died. This key figure in Quebec's political history passed away at the age of 91 years old last Sunday evening. Mr. Dufour was the benchmark for proud representatives in my region. He spent his entire life in Jonquière and was first involved in Alcan's labor union, and then pursued his commitments as mayor and then as member of Quebec's National Assembly for Jonquière. He had very deep ties in his community. He had great integrity, and he was dedicated to Quebec's independent movement. On behalf of the people of Jonquière and of all Quebecers, I would like to offer my sincerest condolences to the family and friends of Mr. Francis Dufour. Thank you. We are now going to continue with Ms. Martinez-Ferrada. Chair. This pandemic has heavily affected eastern Montreal and notably my riding of Hochelaga. Today, I would like to recognize the exceptional work of all volunteers and organizations in Hochelaga that help the most vulnerable people, such as Anonyme, the Cap Saint-Barnabé, Care Montreal, Cuisine Collective, Hochelaga Maisonneuve, the Community Centre in Hochelaga, Resto Chic Pop, and many others. I'd also like to pay tribute to the commitment of store owners who rolled up their sleeves to help people out. And most importantly, I would like to recognize the essential workers and caregivers. I would also like to offer my sincerest condolences to the loved ones of caregivers who lost their lives to protect ours. The citizens of Hochelaga are resilient and have shown solidarity, and I'm proud to rise in this House to pay tribute to them. Mr. Cummings.
I rise today to pay tribute to a great Albertan and former parliamentarian, Louise Feltham, who passed away this Monday after a lengthy battle with cancer. Louise was an entrepreneur, a public servant, and a force of nature. She inspired the family motto, "How hard can it be?" by creating communities and building several homes in her lifetime. In all that she did, Louise broke glass ceilings. Her many firsts included being the first woman to serve as a councillor in rural Alberta, the first female reeve in rural Alberta, the first woman born in Newfoundland to serve in this chamber. She was the MP for Wild Rose from 1988 to 1993. Her son Glenn served as the president of NATE when I chaired the board, and my thoughts and sympathies are with him, his wife Tammy, and the rest of their family for this great loss. Her parliamentary family mourns with you today.
We'll now go on to Mr. Bagnall. Mr. Bagnall.
Mr. Speaker, it is a great honor to speak to the House of Commons today from Whitehorse, Yukon, here on the traditional territory of the Kwandon First Nation and the Ta'an-Quachin Council. As a great historic Canadian event last week, Yukon became home to Canada's first university north of 60. Yukon University will provide Yukoners educational opportunities closer to home, expand our research capabilities and expertise on the Arctic and climate change, and allow those who want to study Northern and First Nation governance to do so in the North. So I encourage all students living in the northern half of Canada to look at the many programs and degrees of Yukon University to continue their studies, in some cases this year virtually, by remaining in the North. I want to congratulate the staff of Yukon College who spent the last decade working towards this transition, and especially the outgoing president, Karen Barnes, all the best in your retirement. Thank you. Merci, Masicho, Suga Sinla.
We'll now go on to Ms. Hutchings. Ms. Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
First of all, from the Long Range Mountains, I too want to send my condolences to my colleague, Mr. Rogers from Bonavista Bureau Trinity, on the loss, tragic loss in St. Lawrence. We're all communities that rely on the sea, and we understand the importance and the tragedy and the hard work it is being fishers. But today, colleagues, I want to mention, as my colleague from across the way mentioned, it's National Tourism Week. So please take the time to get out and thank the tourism and hospitality businesses in your riding. Most businesses around the world were heavily hit hard by COVID-19, and the tourism economy was hit very hard, especially seasonal and rural operations and the 1.8 million people that the industry employs. However, this industry knows how to work hard. They know how to partner. They know how to look after their employees and their guests, and they will find new and innovative opportunities and experiences, and they will build a new business, and they will continue to attract visitors. We know the domestic and local markets will recover first, and I know the operators in my riding are getting ready just for that. It's exciting to speak with them how they're working on their new normal, and it's going to be developed and implemented here in the Long Range Mountains. Remember, too, many of our national parks are opening this weekend. On June 1st, so get out and explore the park in your backyard. I look forward to working with the Tourism Industry Association of Canada and Destination Canada and my colleagues that when we turn the corner of this pandemic, we are ready to rebuild a stronger tourism economy. So friends, go out and discover the tourism treasures in your province. They need your support. Tourism matters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now we're going to continue with Mr. Gould. Thank you very much, Chair. The interpreter would like to note that the sound quality is not sufficient to allow for interpretation. Therefore, interpretation will resume when sound quality improves. Thank you.
Qui ont répondu présent dans Lévis-Lotbinière. Cette crise a créé des besoins pressants et des situations d'urgence sans précédent. Hommes et femmes de cœur, d'engagement dans la dignité humaine, bénévoles, retraités, et vous qui avez accepté de rester sagement à la maison, vous avez fait partie à différents degrés de cette grande équation pour minimiser les impacts de la propagation et éviter le pire. La neige a fondu, les fleurs sont arrivées, plusieurs enfants sont heureux de pouvoir dépenser leur énergie à nouveau et nos aînés sont câlinés avec beaucoup de précautions et nos travailleurs essentiels de la circonscription sont toujours fidèles au poste. Je vous dis bravo, merci, ne lâchez pas, et ce même si votre ciel est déjà bien mérité. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Now we're going to continue with Ms. Bendayen. Thank you very much, Chair. My father, now retired, was a researcher for more than 40 years. He took part in many medical discoveries, and he worked with the University of Montreal, with the CHUM, with the Hospital of Sainte-Justine, and many other institutions in Outremont. In my writing, there are many professors, scientists, researchers who are at the cutting edge of discoveries in Quebec and Canada and who will save lives.
Government has reversed the funding cuts to medical research and invested billions in science. Recently, we've announced new funding for COVID-19 research, for fundamental science, and supports for our academic researchers. We are working very hard in order to find a vaccine for COVID-19, and our fundamental research is helping us to understand viruses that we don't even know the name of yet. It is this work that will help us stay ahead of the curve rather than flatten it. To all our Canadian scientists, and to my dad, thank you.
We now continue with Ms. Alisad. Ms. Alisad.
Mr. Chair, citizens in my riding of Aurora Oak Ridges Richmond Hill are showing incredible compassion as they help their families, their friends, and even strangers during this difficult period. They are our community champions. The Aurora Chamber of Commerce and the Richmond Hill Board of Trade are helping businesses navigate in these difficult times. Organizations like the STEAM Project and Ganesha Temple are making and donating face masks to those in need. The Aurora Museum and Archives is collecting artifacts to document the pandemic for future generations. And the Aurora Farmers Market is bringing local farmers and businesses to us. But this year, with one key person missing, our community has lost one of the farmers market founders, our jam lady, Jan Friedman. We were deeply saddened by her passing, and she will be sorely missed. My sincere thanks to everyone who's working to ease the burden on one another during this crisis. It's not easy, but this too will pass, and we will be stronger for it. But in the meantime, stay safe and let us all do our part to be community champions. Thank you.
Maintenant, nous allons continuer avec Monsieur Del.
We'll now continue with Mr. Deltel. Mr. Chair, we all understand that a crisis that is affecting the world over leads to deficits, and we know that a deficit is a bill we're sending to our children and grandchildren. That's why it's very important to be careful and to know where we're headed. Every time we ask a question from the government, no one can tell us how much the Canadian deficit is. We're not the only ones to be worried about the lack of transparency from this government. The Parliamentary Budget Officer said that he was quite concerned. There has to be a deadline. Otherwise, we're going to see unprecedented taxation levels that we haven't seen for generations, because there's not a great deal left without heading towards a significant structural deficit. For weeks, almost every day, the Prime Minister is announcing new money, but these are hundreds of billions of dollars that are spent with no idea of what the deficit has totaled up to. This government should be careful. The Prime Minister should know that you can't be Santa every day, because the bills in January come hard and fast.
Mr. Garrison.
Making sure science informs our health policies is critical during a pandemic. That's why I'm so disappointed that the Liberals have maintained the ban on blood donations from gay men and trans women. There is no science behind this ban. Not only does it reinforce homophobia and transphobia, it also reduces our blood supply at this critical time. Now we've learned that the ban will also result in rejecting plasma donors when plasma is so critical in emerging COVID-19 research and treatment. More than 17 countries, including Argentina, Italy, and Spain, have no deferral period for men who have sex with men. They know that behavior-based screening provides better security for the blood supply than discriminatory identity-based rules. I have asked the minister many times to lift the gay blood ban, and I do so again today. But today, I also call on family and friends of gay men and trans women to step up now and donate blood in place of those of us who cannot. When it comes to blood donations, we really should all be in this together.
We will now continue with Mr. Desilets. Mr. Speaker, I missed you, by the way. The wage subsidy is for people who are concerned about losing their jobs. It's for people who need it. It's not for millionaire political parties like the Liberals and Conservatives. In Rivière-des-Mille-Îles, like many other ridings, there are businesses who every day can't access the wage subsidy. There are people in my riding, as in your riding, who cannot hire their staff for the summer for their business. There are businesses who haven't lost quite 30% of their revenue, who lost only 29%, and they can't access the subsidy. Everywhere, there are businesses falling through the cracks, whereas the Liberals and the Conservatives have a wage subsidy to fund their partisan activities. And they're doing it right under our noses. Since January, these two parties have collected millions of dollars. Every single dollar that they're taking comes from taxpayers. That money belongs to workers, not to political parties. It is shameful. It's disrespectful. It's ridiculous. The Liberals and Conservatives need to pay this back. It is so clear to me. For the Bloc, it is quite clear. This is an issue of ethics. and morality and respect of citizens. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Schmale. Mr. Schmale.
Thank you, Chair. This week is Paramedic Services Week, and I would like to take a moment to thank the men and women who work tirelessly at the best of times to protect and save lives. Their efforts during COVID-19, like the services provided by many frontline workers in healthcare, such as personal support workers, doctors, nurses, janitorial, clerical, and lab technicians, plus many others, have been extraordinary and truly beyond the call of duty. I hope this week all Canadians will take a moment to thank a paramedic or any frontline healthcare worker in their community for the amazing services they have been called upon to perform and will continue to provide in the challenging days ahead. Chair, I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention another unfortunate consequence of the current pandemic, the cancellation of the Kinmount Fair, a renowned event that has been running since 1870. This year was to mark its 150th anniversary, but in true Kinmount spirit, this heartbreaking decision will not only deter organizers from planning an even bigger and better event in 2021.
Now we'll go to Ms. Dillon. Ms. Dillon.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank, from the bottom of my heart, the members of the Canadian Armed Forces for their help that they've offered in nursing homes. Their deployment came at a critical time. Many of our seniors desperately needed them. Through the testimony of our members, we've seen once again the full scope of the nightmare that seniors have been enduring for quite some time.
Who could not fend for themselves. They were treated with profound cruelty and carelessness. Among many other loathsome details, they were left to starve, abused, live in filth, their cries of anguish ignored. They were tormented and left in their agony. There is no excuse. No one ever deserves to be treated the way they were. I am talking about humanity, about compassion and mercy. It is up to each and every one of us to make sure no elderly person is ever hurt in this vile manner again. I take this moment to honor these victims. Thank you.
Now, before moving on, I just want to remind the honourable members that the rules state that the statements by members should be 60 seconds. That's 1 minute. And I notice usually there's a few seconds and it doesn't matter, but some of them have gone quite a bit over. So starting Monday, we'll be cutting them off at 60 seconds. So I encourage everyone to practice them or take a look at them and try to keep them within the 60 seconds so that we don't go over on our allotted time. And now we'll move on to questions. Nous allons maintenant continuer.
We will now continue with questions for ministers. I would like to remind members that they need to speak relatively slowly to allow the interpreters to understand what is being said.
Considerate of the interpreters and speak at a regular rate, a little bit slower. I know sometimes we get excited in the House and we get, we speak a little quickly. So just be conscious of it, and I'm sure it'll be appreciated by the interpreters and those at home who are listening in so that they can make out the important questions and answers that are being given in this room, in this chamber. Now we'll go to our first question, Mr. Barlow.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This government has consistently worked to shut down Parliament, undermine personal sittings, and argue that the business of this country can be done by Zoom. But for work of the G7, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "There's no question that in-person meetings are much more effective than even virtual meetings." So by pushing to go virtual, is this Prime Minister's goal to make Canada's Parliament less effective?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Speaker, absolutely not. And in fact, I am pleased to be here in person, meeting with members from across the country and having the opportunity for our colleagues who live further away from Ottawa than I do to join us. Parliament plays an essential role in our democracy, and it's great.
And we'll go back to Mr. Barlow. Mr. Barlow.
Well, Mr. Chair, that's exactly the point. This isn't Parliament. This is a committee meeting. We do not have Parliament. This is a virtual committee. But a Saskatchewan producer called me and said he tried to use the online agri-stability calculator and said most farmers can't use it. And in fact, you can't put in your inventory changes, what actually means it will give you erroneous information. So why is the Agriculture Minister touting this lifeline for farmers when it doesn't actually even work?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Speaker. Of course, the agricultural sector is critical to our country, and I think the questions that some of us have been asking around food security have reminded us how lucky we are as Canadians to be living in an agricultural superpower. Now, when it comes to specific technical questions that farmers have, please, they should turn to the Minister of Agriculture. We'll be delighted to help.
Mr. Barlow.
Can the Deputy Prime Minister tell me how much it costs to develop this online agri-stability calculator?
The Honourable Minister.
What I can say is we are very mindful of, very grateful for the extreme...
We'll now go back to Mr. Barlow. Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Chair, farmers have even hired accountants to try and navigate this shiny online calculator, but they've been told that they would go broke before they even received any money. So will this government admit that this is just a fig leaf before any actual assistance will come to Canadian farmers?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, many farmers, certainly many of the farmers of my acquaintance, have worked with accountants for a very long time. Farmers are sophisticated business people. They are business people who deal in the futures markets every day. They run hugely important businesses.
Now go back to Mr. Barlow. Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Speaker, it's that kind of condescension that is so frustrating to Canadian farmers who didn't have to hire an accountant to figure out an assistance program. But, Mr. Speaker, the last time I questioned the Prime Minister and the Minister about the secret carbon tax data, they said only part of it was secret, and the rest of that would be given to the House. I've yet to receive that. Would that be tabled today in both official languages to justify to Canadian farmers why the government has increased the carbon tax in the midst of a pandemic?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what is condescending is to behave as if farmers are not highly sophisticated businessmen. They hire economists, they hire agronomists, they are at the cutting edge. I am proud of the sophistication of Canadian farmers, and I'm proud of the support we offer them.
I want to remind the honourable members that the background and the heckling really makes it difficult for the members who are tuning in via Zoom. So I just want to make sure they're aware of what they're doing to our colleagues who are online. Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Chair, for 64 days, the Finance Minister has failed to deliver on his promise to assist Canada's energy sector. Small oil and gas companies still can't qualify for BDC loans. And last week's announcement, in my opinion, for large employers was short of exploitive. If the government doesn't fulfill its promise to provide support for the energy sector, they are in turn supporting foreign, unethically sourced oil and costing good, reliable Canadian jobs. After 64 days, when will the credit options be available to Canada's small and medium-sized energy companies?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the member opposite about one thing. The energy sector and energy workers are absolutely essential to our economy, and we support them. One of the things I'm the most proud of is the $1.7 billion our government has committed to cleaning up orphan wells. That money today has created jobs in Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan. People are working because of it, and they are cleaning up their communities thanks to that support.
Maintenant, nous allons continuer avec Monsieur.
We will now continue with Mr. Brunel Duceppe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try not to waste any time. Can the Liberal Party of Canada reimburse the money that it's taken from the Wage Subsidy Fund, yes or no? The Honourable Deputy Minister. Mr. Speaker, the goal of the subsidy is to support workers and to help them keep their jobs and to help them stay connected. We will now continue with Mr. Brunel Duceppe. I'll take that for a no, Mr. Chair. In my writing, there's Trillium Media that doesn't qualify for the wage subsidy. They haven't lost enough of their income. There are other businesses in the same situation. Does the Liberal Party of Canada consider itself to be in a bigger financial peril than my local media outlets? The Deputy Minister. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to remind the member on the other side what we've done to support Canadians. More than 8 million Canadians received the emergency response benefit. 35,000 businesses received loans through emergency programs. Back to Mr. Brunel-Duceppe. I'll take that for a yes, Mr. Chair. Does my honourable colleague consider that the billions they're handing out come from taxpayers? On the other side of the House, do we consider that multi-million-dollar parties are entitled to the same public funds? Yes or no? The Honourable Deputy Minister. Mr. Chair, I will continue by reminding my colleague on the other side what this government is doing today to support Canadian men and women, as well as the men and women of Quebec. Significant amounts of the wage subsidy have been approved. More than 2 million Canadians have it today. Back to Mr. Brunel-Duceppe. I'll take that for a yes, Mr. Speaker. This is great because the money that they're taking from the wage subsidy, it's going right into their election fund. When they're going to get their election expenses reimbursed, they'll get 60% of that money back. The wage subsidy, they will have gotten some return on investment. Does this not violate election legislation, yes or no? The Honourable Deputy Minister. Mr. Chair, our programs don't discriminate. They are there to help all workers, to help all Canadians, to help all Quebecers. The member spoke of businesses and sectors that need more support, and we agree. We think that we should all work together to keep trying to help Canadians and Quebecers. We will go back to Mr. Brunel-Duceppe. I'm not sure how to take it this time. I don't think I understood everything. I think we need to eject the tape and give us an honest answer. Can my colleague on the other side answer a very simple question? How are they using the very generous subsidy that they have dipped into? The Deputy Minister. Mr. Chair, I want to call attention to what's important when we talk about our work. When I talk about the economy, what's important is that we've set up unprecedented economic measures that are urgent and necessary. And that's what we will continue to do. Mr. Duceppe-Brunel. I denounce the use of a program by the Liberal Party, of a program that they have set up. Can my colleague say if she can look at business people in her riding in the face and tell them that they don't deserve the wage subsidy because their revenue losses have only hit 28 or 29%, whereas her party has its hand in the cookie jar? The Deputy Minister. Mr. Speaker, I am completely ready to look business people and workers in my riding in the face. And that's why, it is because our government is doing a great deal to help Canadians during this historic crisis. Our economic support program is the biggest program in the history of Canada.
Mr. Singh.
Thank you very much, Chair. The CAF report showed the link between the cost of equipment and the lack of care for our seniors. Is the government going to admit today that there's no room for profits in taking care of our seniors? The Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Chair. That's a very important question, and I'd like to thank the member for asking it. I think this is a historic week, and all Canadians have seen what happened in Ontario and Quebec. We're going back to Mr. Singh now.
Advocates have all pointed out that in the for-profit model of care for seniors, there is more emphasis on the bottom line than care for seniors. Will the Liberal government admit that there is no place for profit when it comes to the care of our seniors?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to start by saying one thing, and that is to publicly thank in this House Brigadier General Konrad Mialkowski and his team for compiling the assessment that they did of long care homes in Ontario. They acted with courage, they acted with compassion. What they did is historic, and we all...
We'll now go back to Mr. Singh.
The Canadian Forces, of course, always deserve our thanks, but they don't need our thanks right now. They need to see some action on what they pointed out. The government owns Revera, the second largest long-term care provider in Canada. It's for profit, and it's facing a $50 million lawsuit for negligence. What is the government doing to protect seniors in the long-term care home that they own?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I do agree with the member opposite that after what we have learned this week, all options must be on the table when it comes to how care for our elders will be provided in Canada in the future. I think it is clear to us all that root and branch reform is necessary. We need to act with speed, but not haste, and work with our provincial partners.
We'll now go back to Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh.
If all the options are on the table, will the Liberal government commit to removing profit from long-term care, particularly in the long-term care home, which is the second largest in Canada, Revera, that the government owns? Will they commit to removing profit from long-term care?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
What we will commit to do, and I hope with the support of all members of this House, is to work very carefully and also very urgently in close cooperation with our provincial partners under whose jurisdiction this falls to ensure that these heart-wrenching reports mean that as a country we turn the page.
Now go back to Mr. Singh.
Mr. Speaker, Revera is owned by the Liberal government, by the government. It is a Crown corporation owned by the government. So let's not hear excuses. Is the government doing anything to ensure that seniors are cared for? Are they providing for robust inspections? Yes or no?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I do want to clarify one point in the member's question. Canadian Crown corporations are not Liberal, they are not Conservative, they are not partisan. One of the strengths of Canada is that we have non-partisan government institutions, and they serve us extremely well.
To Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh.
Right now, the current government is responsible for Revera. It is a Crown corporation. Will the government commit to ensuring that there is no profit anymore in Revera, as we've seen they are facing a $15 million lawsuit and there's been horrible negligence?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I said at the outset, when it comes to the ownership structure of long care facilities, it is something that needs to be on the table. Everything does. I also want to emphasize how important it is for us to do what we have been doing, which is work very closely with the provinces under whose jurisdiction this falls. In just the past 24 hours, I have spoken with Premiers Ford, Horgan, and Moe, including about long-term care facilities.
We'll now continue to Ms. Vecchio. Ms. Vecchio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Today I join critics from the NDP, the Bloc, and the Green Party to ask, dealing with women and gender equality, and asking where has the $75 million towards sexual exploitation and human trafficking gone? Last week, organizations had to close their doors to end programs to help vulnerable women and girls. So the simple question is, where is the money?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, first of all, let me begin by thanking the member for the very important question. And I agree that
Human trafficking, which is a crime of coercion and exploitation, is unacceptable, and we have to ensure that we provide the supports necessary to the victims of this crime. We have, as the member knows, launched a new comprehensive national strategy to combat human trafficking, and we've incorporated a new pillar in that strategy of empowerment. Empowerment to ensure that the focus...
Go back to Ms. Vecchio. Ms. Vecchio.
With all due respect, it's great that we have a strategy, but when money is not going to the doors of these organizations that provide these services, a strategy does nothing. All talk, no action. Where's the money?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, let me pick up where my honourable colleague left off, acknowledging that trafficking is a heinous crime, acknowledging that there are hundreds of organizations across the country working to solve the challenges that come with human trafficking, and remind my honourable colleague that hundreds of organizations have received supports, and we will have more to announce to further support.
Now go to Ms. Vecchio. Back to Ms. Vecchio.
So very simple. What should we tell the young women and girls right now looking for these supports? What is the answer from the government?
The Honourable Minister.
That no one should have to live a life with violence, whether it's sexual, physical, financial, or emotional, and that the government of Canada...
Back to Ms. Vecchio. Ms. Vecchio.
Thank you very much. And yesterday I happened to be part of the Health Committee, and there was the Battered Women Support Services there as witnesses. She shared with me that the organizations that she's associated with, over 500 organizations that deal with sexual assault and shelters, did not receive funding. Can you explain why?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Angela and the team at the Battered Women's Shelter. They are receiving funds through Feminists Deliver, but there are hundreds of organizations that will receive additional funds to provide the critical care that they need to support frontlines and the most vulnerable in their communities with, and we will have more to say soon.
Now we'll go back to Ms. Vecchio. Ms. Vecchio.
We know that calls to centres like the Battered Women's Support Services have gone up by 300 times. So this is a huge concern I have. So what made this group of assault services and shelters, what made them ineligible?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague is putting words in my mouth. As I said, there are hundreds of organizations like the Battered Women's Centre that are going to be receiving funds from the federal government in the coming days. We thank them for their work, and we will have more to say very soon.
Go back to Ms. Vecchio. Ms. Vecchio.
But the need is now. When we know that calls, for instance, London Abuse Women's Centre, up by 45%. I've heard from communities where it's gone up 200%. And as I said yesterday, I heard 300%. The money is needed now. Where is the money for this program?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, some organizations are seeing demands up as high as 400%, with their capacity limited by 400%. We've centers and women's shelters, 700 have received funds, more to come soon, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate that this Parliament includes a consensus among all colleagues that feminism and supporting women...
We'll now go back to Ms. Vecchio. Ms. Vecchio.
Well, if we're talking about being a feminist government, one simple question. Yesterday, the minister was not willing to answer the question, so I asked the Minister for Women and Gender, through the chair, of course. How can a feminist government support the Wet'suwet'en First Nation women whose titles were stripped from them?
The Honourable Minister. Do we have...
Mr. Speaker? It sounds like my honourable colleague wants to compare their record on advancing equality with ours. We are happy to do that, and the Minister for Crown and Indigenous Relations has been working very hard to move this historic agreement forward.
Ms. Vecchio.
These women lost their titles, and the decisions were made with the hereditary chiefs and not the elected chiefs. Why is this government not standing up with these women hereditary chiefs who were stripped of their titles?
The Honourable Minister.
I think the honourable member knows that the route to self-determination is to have First Nations, Inuit, and Métis determine their own governance and abide by their own laws. Right now, the Wet'suwet'en Nation is in that process of determining what kind of governance they would like.
We'll now go on to Mr. Sweet. Mr. Sweet.
Thank you, Chair. The Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act has passed both houses of Congress in the United States and is now on the way to the Oval Office for signature. What is Canada's position on this Muslim minority being jailed and re-educated by the Chinese Communist Party?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you to my honourable colleague for that question. We are deeply concerned by the human rights situation faced by the Uyghurs and other minorities in China. This is an issue our government has raised directly with the Chinese. Canada has also repeatedly voiced its concerns at the UN Human Rights Council. We will continue to call on the
Go back to Mr. Sweet. Mr. Sweet.
The Burmese government is another being exploited by the CCP. Their Muslim minority was driven out and now languishes in Bangladesh, who is a Commonwealth partner, in the midst of this global pandemic. What will Canada do to answer the injustice done to the Rohingya?
The Honourable Minister.
Canada will always stand with human rights. Canada has repeatedly voiced its concerns with the UN Human Rights Council. We will continue to call on the Chinese government to ensure that human rights of all of its people, including the freedom of religion, are fully respected.
Mr. Sweet.
Yesterday, the Rubber Stamp National People's Congress passed the National Security Bill undermining Hong Kong's autonomy and strengthening a grip of the Communist Party of China. Will the Prime Minister condemn this law?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada, with our international partners in the US, Australia, and UK, made a joint statement in which we are expressing our deep concern regarding China's imposition of a new security law for Hong Kong.
Mr. Sweet.
Canada has an admirable history of doing the right thing and helping when the situation is bleak. The Suez Canal, Cyprus, the fall of apartheid, child and maternal health in Africa, and Afghanistan are examples in my lifetime of how Canada has weighed in significantly. Why is the government letting down Hong Kongers?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with hundreds of thousands of Canadians living in Hong Kong, we have a vested interest in the stability and prosperity and the foundation of which are Hong Kong's relative autonomy and basic freedoms. Canada will always support and promote freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and freedoms of press around the world.
Mr. Sweet.
Well, I think the 300,000 Canadians that are in Hong Kong want a little bit more than interest from the government. They'd like some action. What exactly is the government going to do to help those 300,000 Canadians who are in a breach between democracy and tyranny now?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has expressed deep concern regarding China's imposition of the new security law for Hong Kong. The proposed law would undermine the one country, two systems framework. We are going to continue to support and promote freedom of speech, freedom of expression,
Back to
and freedom
Mr.
of press around the world.
Sweet.
Mr. Speaker, deep concern. After being fired at with pepper bullets and tear gas yesterday, 300 students were arrested in Hong Kong while peacefully protesting. Where is the outrage from this government in regard to what the CCP is doing in Hong Kong?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as we have said, we are deeply concerned about the arrests of political figures and about the law that has been imposed on Hong Kong. And as we said, Canada will always stand up and support freedom of speech,
Back to Mr. Sweet.
freedom of expression.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to give the Minister another opportunity to answer the third question that I gave. Yesterday, the Rubber Stamp National People's Congress passed the National Security Bill undermining Hong Kong's autonomy and strengthening the iron grip of the Chinese Communist Party. Will this government condemn that law today?
The Honourable Minister.
Canada will continue to support Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy and freedoms under the basic law of the One Country, Two Systems framework. Canada and our international partners with the US, Australia, and the UK have made a joint statement deeply expressing our concern regarding China's imposition of the new security law for Hong Kong. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We're now going to continue with Mr. Blaney. Thank you very much, Chair. My question, I'm happy to represent the city of Lévis, and I hope you won't take that from my time. But my question is for the Minister of Employment. On April 8th, the minister announced measures for the Canada Summer Jobs program. We thought that they were going to enhance it, but can the minister confirm that it's the same budget between April 7th and April 9th? The Honourable Minister.
Can confirm that we have increased the subsidies for, the wage subsidies for Canada Student Jobs. We have added flexibilities, including the ability to have part-time work, the ability to have the jobs extended until February of next year. This being said, the budget was not changed. It remains at 70,000 job placements for 70,000 students, at 100% of them being subsidized at 100%. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Blaney. The minister confirms it's the same budget, but when we reduce the number of jobs in the middle of a pandemic, why would we do so when we're in the midst of a pandemic, whereas our young people want to work? The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, I can assure the member and all members and all Canadians that they're, despite the fact that he's singling out the Canada Summer Jobs, we also created an additional 76,000 jobs through our youth employment and skills strategy, an additional 40,000 placements for students. I can assure the member that we are.
Mr. Blaney, how many jobs are not currently filled, and because the program is lagging behind previous years, how come there's still money left to invest in our companies to create summer jobs? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are not lagging behind whatsoever. We created flexibilities in Canada Summer Jobs so that we can assuredly fill all these 70,000 positions. We are rolling them out in waves. There's 45,000 jobs up on our jobs bank, and I can assure young Canadians there is work for them there, and I encourage them to check out Job Bank.
Mr. Blaney, I'd like to confirm that there are delays in the midst of a pandemic, even though the universities are out and the companies are waiting to hire young people. Chair, through you, why are we refusing to create additional positions in the Canada Summer Jobs program this year, whereas companies need these jobs to get through the pandemic? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure you we are not refusing to create any additional jobs. We've increased the number of jobs funded through our government youth programs by over 100%. There's a number of jobs. We've added flexibilities into Canada Summer Jobs to maximize that program in ways that it never would have been maximized had we not done this. I can assure the member opposite we are doing our utmost to make sure that young people have good quality job experiences this summer.
We're going to return to Mr. Blaney now. Maximizing, we're talking about fewer jobs this year for students because there's the same budget. So my question for the minister is quite simple. How come you're not funding more jobs within the Canada Summer Jobs program rather than having unlimited jobs under the CERB for students? We need people and we need them to work. The Honourable Minister.
I agree absolutely that we need young people to work this summer, and that's why we're creating a number of opportunities through a number of programs, Mr. Speaker. Canada Summer Jobs is being maxed out, and that's a good thing. We've increased the number of jobs we've added an additional 76,000 jobs, and I can assure the member that we're creating so many jobs, and it's so exciting for our young people.
Mr. Blaney, through you, with the CERB for students, young people don't have an incentive to go to work, and employers are having a hard time recruiting students. But yet the Canada Summer Job program could be enhanced. How come we're not doing this? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the member opposite is not implying that young people don't want to work, that somehow by offering them income support that they take out of necessity, that they don't want to work. Young people want to work. They want to serve in their communities. That's why we're creating these additional jobs beyond Canada Summer Jobs. That's why we've increased flexibilities in Canada Summer Jobs so that we can, in fact, maximize these programs. Mr. Speaker, Canadian youth want to work.
Now we'll go to Ms. Gladue. Ms. Gladue.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yesterday, my colleague asked the Minister of Public Safety a question that he didn't get a good answer to. Why are asylum seekers being allowed to cross the closed border and reunify with their families when, in fact, Canadians are not being allowed to reunify with their counterparts in the U.S.?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And just to correct an error that was just repeated, we have put in rules that have excluded people from non-essential travel. We have an agreement currently with the United States that people crossing our borders irregularly are being directed back to the United States, and we put in protection for those individuals and to uphold our international obligations. We'll continue.
We'll go back to Ms. Gladue. Ms. Gladue.
Well, Chair, I have in my riding a pregnant woman who's having her first child and the father of the baby is not being allowed to come over. I have another citizen who's married to an American woman who needs medical services every 3 weeks, who is not being allowed to go over and come back. And I also have parents that have not seen their children in months because they're not allowing custody arrangements between Canadians and Americans to continue. Will the minister create exemptions to allow the reunification of these Canadians with their family?
The Honourable Minister.
Again, I thank the member for an important question, and it is never our intention to keep families apart. At the same time, we are exercising all due diligence to ensure that we prevent non-essential travel to protect the health and safety of Canadians. We've been working very hard to ensure that we have a solution for those individuals who need and want to reunite with their families, and we will have further information on that as soon as we're able to resolve that difficulty.
Ms. Gladue.
Thank you. To the Minister of Agriculture, she has known that there's been a capacity issue on cattle processing for more than a year and has done nothing. We don't have a BSE exemption so that we could use American processing producers, and there's been no incentive to create additional capacity to process. How bad does it have to get for the minister to act?
Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, on a fait...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've done a great deal. We invested $100 million in the beef and pork sectors through the Agri-Recovery Program. That's significant when we think that over the last several years, that program only offered up to $15 million. We injected $77.5 million to improve processing capacity.
Ms. Gladue.
Well, it still hasn't solved the problem. That's not a beef burger. That's a nothing burger. What is the minister going to do to help out the cattle farmers that are struggling, especially in this pandemic?
L'Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, the meat sector through the Agri-Recovery Program and other programs, we've included $77.5 million to help processors face the situation to reorganize the workplace.
Ms. Gladue?
It's not enough for the farmers in my area. To the Minister of Canada Revenue, I've had complaints from seniors in my riding that paper tax filings are not being processed. They're sitting on desks because people are not going into the office. When will we begin to process those paper tax filings so that seniors can get the refunds they need?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, we consider this to be a very difficult situation for Canadians. Our government will do everything to support them. I can confirm to you that the agency is processing those claims, but because of reduced personnel in place, there are delays. We truly regret these inconveniences that can be caused for those who have filed with paper tax returns.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président. Je ne sais pas si c'est seulement moi, mais on entend tellement les débits d'intervention.
Je m'excuse?
I'm sorry?
Est-ce que c'est quand il y a des interventions d'autres?
Is it when there's people who are not speaking? Inaudible for the interpreter.
OK. Je vais en parler.
Very well.
OK. On va en parler avec les techniciens.
We'll talk with the technicians. I don't know if we can do something now, but for next time, we'll see if we can fix it. There seems to be some echo, perhaps?
OK.
Inaudible.
On va voir ce qu'on peut faire et certainement par...
We'll see what we can do, and by next Monday it should be fixed. In the meantime, we'll do our best. Thank you for letting us know. We will continue now back to Ms. Gladue.
Thank you, Chair. The Canadian Grief Alliance has submitted a proposal. Obviously, with COVID, many people are struggling with the loss of loved ones and their grief, and they have submitted a proposal looking for a very modest sum of funding from the government to extend their virtual grief counseling. Can the Minister of Health let us know if that funding has been approved?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of that specific proposal, but I commit to asking my officials to bring it forward to me, and I'll take a look. Thank you.
Ms. Gladue, a 15-second question, please.
All right. Many are struggling with mental health in this pandemic. Can the Minister of Health tell us what she is doing to increase the capacity to help people that are suffering?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know I don't have much time, but let me repeat our infomercial to Canadians to visit Wellness Together, the portal that will provide access to Canadians to a variety of mental health supports, including connection to professionals.
Maintenant, nous allons continuer avec...
We will now continue with Mr. Champoux. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Sorry, I made a mistake. You are not the next person. It is actually Mr. Waugh who has the floor.
My apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Major events and mass gatherings being really out of the conversation for the foreseeable future. Many event venues right now, as concerts, fairgrounds, are looking for the possibility of going a year plus without any revenue. Many are owned or even managed by nonprofit organizations. I can think of many in my riding. Broadway Fringe Festival, Shakespeare on the Saskatchewan, Rock the River, Jazz Festival, the Folk Fest, along with WDM and the Aviation Museum. My question to the Minister of Heritage, what support is being available today to these organizations that are left up in the air?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this question, and thank you for the member for it as well. As he knows, we have done a number of things in the past weeks to help the arts and culture sector. We could talk about the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, the wage subsidy. We've provided advance help to a number of organizations from Heritage Program or the Canada Council for the Arts, on top of a $500 million program, which has started to be deployed and will continue to be deployed in the coming weeks, specifically for the type of organizations.
Go back to Mr. Waugh. Mr. Waugh.
Well, many media organizations are struggling. The reality only makes the allegations of predatory behavior being levied against the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation even more disturbing. I asked the minister on May 7th about these allegations, and he said he had not been informed of them, but would look into the allegations. We can't afford to have a Crown Corporation using its status to try to wipe out its competitors in this country. Has the minister begun the investigation into the Canadian Corporation, and does he have any information that he can share with us here today?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member said, these are allegations, and as you well know, the Canadian Broadcast Corporation is an independent body. It's not controlled by the Minister of Heritage or the government.
Mr. Waugh.
These allegations were in the National Post on April 22nd. I brought this up to you on May 7th when I talked virtually. And even interesting, Mr. Chair, these allegations against the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation came from an organization in the minister's own province of Quebec. So, can the minister take action to address any predatory behavior on behalf of the CBC? Or can the government friends at the CBC simply get away with anything?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allegations are allegations, whether they're made in Quebec, Ontario, or Alberta. And as I said, the Canadian Broadcast Corporation is an independent organization.
Mr. Roy.
When I last rose on May 7th, the committee responsible for the government's massive $595 million media bailout package had not met. Well, it's 3 weeks later now. Has the committee met? If yes, when can the media organizations, and I hear there's only 29 publishers, expect the support promised? And if they haven't met, when are they going to meet?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the question. As the member is well aware, this program is a tax break program, and in order for organization to qualify, they had to fill their income tax form, which they've done over the last few weeks. The program is in place, and we are confident that our media organization will receive the money by the end of the summer.
Well, a 20-second question, hopefully.
Was rolled out to media organizations, some 1,400 organizations. Yesterday, Post Media announced another 40 layoffs. Has the $30 million been distributed so far in this country to all 1,400 media organizations?
Well, Minister, in 20 seconds or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would be happy to provide the list of those 1,400 media organizations that have received funding through that ad campaign.
Okay, maintenant nous allons continuer avec...
We will now continue with Mr. Champoux. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel generous today. I'll share my time with my colleague for Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes Verchères. Mr. Chair, at the beginning of the crisis, the government asked employers in Quebec and Canada to set an example in the situation we're going through. Many of them turned to the Supplemental Unemployment Benefit Program, known as the SUB, to maintain the link of employment and to help their employees get through this difficult time. However, on May 22nd, even though these business people had ensured that the SUB program would be still valid if CERB were set up, were surprised because there were employees who were told they had to repay what they had gotten through the SUB. One of the biggest employers in Drummondville, Suprema, 150 of its employees are affected. At Bridgestone and Joliet, 1,100 employees have been affected by this decision. 150 employees at Goodyear, in Valleyfield, and dozens of others. Does the minister intend to correct this misstep to allow employers who can and who want to top up their employees' salaries during this difficult time? The Honourable Minister.
I thank the honourable member for the question, Mr. Speaker. When we put in place the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the underlying goal was to make sure that every worker who needed it had access to income support as they were losing their employment for COVID reasons. We understood that that meant that some workers would not have access moving forward, although let me clarify that subplans that existed prior to March 15th are definitely in place. And we consider the fact that workers have access to $1,000 a month in addition to CERB to permit employers, and we've spoken with employers about this, to assist their employees in an equitable way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Champoux, a 15-second question, please. Mr. Chair, employers have heard nothing from the government. And yet they had been assured that the SUB would be transferred appropriately. Employers acted honestly and in good faith, and they feel ripped off. Does the government intend to fix this misstep? It's just the right thing to do.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the member opposite that subplans that were in place prior to March 15th are indeed in place now. And in addition, employees who are now on the CERB as an alternative have access to $1,000 of income in addition to their CERB. We are working with employers to perhaps provide that $1,000 in lieu of the subplans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We are now
moving on to Mr. Barsalou Duval.
Le 27 avril dernier, Option Consommateur.
April 27th, Option Consommateur sent a letter to the Minister of Transportation because airlines had refused to reimburse clients for cancelled flights, which runs counter to legislation in Quebec. What is the minister doing to fix this situation? Mr. Chair, I sympathize and I understand the frustration of those who would have preferred to get a reimbursement. This is not an ideal situation. However, at this time, airlines are going through a very difficult time. If they had to immediately reimburse those tickets, many of them would go bankrupt. Mr. Barcelou Duval. They're playing the same tape again. A few hours ago, there was a motion passed that the Legislative Assembly wants airlines under federal jurisdiction to allow clients whose flights have been cancelled due to the pandemic get fully reimbursed. What does the Minister of Transportation have to say to the Legislative Assembly of Quebec, the Honourable Minister? As my colleague knows, the Transportation Office has made a decision and deemed it acceptable under the circumstances in a non-binding way that airlines could offer credits that would be good for up to 2 years. And under those circumstances, it does not expire. Mr. Barcelou Duval, a 15-second question, please. Mr. Chair, I think it particular that we have a minister and an Office of Transportation saying that the laws of Quebec are not that important and that they can work around them. I think it's a strange way to function. According to the famous Canadian Constitution that they imposed, I don't think that's how it should work. The Honourable Minister in 15 seconds or less. As my colleague knows, the Transportation Office of Canada is a quasi-judicial organization that is independent from Transport Canada and the Canadian government. We will now take a short break.
A pause, to allow employees supporting the meeting to switch in safety, including myself.
I didn't do the first one. You heard that.
Yeah, that's a very good transition.
Thank you, and we'll now carry on with Mr. Baker, Etobicoke Centre. Mr. Baker, go ahead.
Speaker, I'll be sharing my time with the member for Glengarry Prescott Russell. My question is to the Minister of Health. Minister, in Etobicoke Centre, we are mourning the loss of 42 residents to COVID-19 at the Eatonville Care Centre. This week, we received a disturbing report from the Canadian Armed Forces documenting appalling and completely unacceptable conditions in the Eatonville Care Centre in Etobicoke, Orchard Villa in Pickering, Altamont Care Community in Scarborough, Hawthorne Place in North York, and Holland Christian Homes, Grace Manor in Brampton. It is beyond reprehensible that our seniors are being treated this way. As I said in the House of Commons on May 7th, we need immediate action and comprehensive reform of long-term care. The 4 other MPs and I, who represent the residents of these homes, wrote to Premier Ford yesterday to urge him to appoint a third-party manager to oversee all operations, to call a full public inquiry because a government commission is not enough, and to work in partnership with the Government of Canada to establish enforceable national standards for long-term care homes across our country. Minister, will you call on the Government of Ontario to establish a full public inquiry, and will you work with provincial governments to establish and implement enforceable national standards for long-term care homes across Canada so that our seniors from coast to coast to coast can receive the quality of care that they deserve?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his very important question. I think all Canadians were horrified, shocked, and saddened to hear about the conditions that elders were living in those particular homes, and that many seniors struggle with across the country. There is no question that we have to do better for our seniors. I know the Prime Minister has been very vocal about the need to do more to support provinces and territories to provide better care for seniors no matter where they live. Thank you.
Mr. Baker, you could another 20 seconds or so if you can manage that. We have left.
Thank you. I'll pass on my time to the member for Glengarry Prescott Russell.
Will do, and we'll now go to Mr.
Now we'll move to Mr. Drouin from Glengarry Prescott Russell. Thank you very much, Chair. As we know, farmers across Canada have had a tough time in recent months. In my riding, farmers are looking for workers, and young people are looking for work. I'm happy to hear that the summer jobs program will meet these needs. And I'm happy to hear that the government has enhanced the youth skills program to help to create 700 new jobs for young people in the agricultural sector. Can the Minister of Agriculture tell us when and how farmers will be able to apply for this new program? The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Chair. Our producers are working harder than ever to support Canadians while they adapt to tough challenges in terms of labour and access to labour. The Prime Minister announced this week an enhanced program for youth skills so that we can hire young people in the agricultural sector. We're talking about a $9.2 million investment to help young people from 15 to 30 years of age to find work in the agricultural sector. We consulted if you're interested, they can consult the website of Agricultural Canada. Mr. Drouin.
Now to Mr. Johns, Courtney Alberni. Mr. Johns, go ahead.
He's on mute.
Oh, Mr. Johns, I just have to unmute your signal there.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be splitting my time with the member from Winnipeg Centre. In early April, the NDP asked for a commercial rent abatement program so tenants could apply for help instead of depending on their landlords. But the government chose to leave commercial tenants helpless if their landlord can't apply or doesn't want to. On Monday, we wrote to ministers again asking them to negotiate a nationwide moratorium on commercial rent evictions with the provinces and territories so tenants can't be kicked out. Will the minister take action to ensure no small business owner is evicted during COVID-19?
Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for his question. We recognize the challenges that small businesses in particular, as well as landlords, are facing during the course of COVID-19. We have worked together with the provinces to come up with an approach that would provide an incentive for landlords to give a rent reduction to their commercial tenants. We have opened that as of Monday. Of course, we recognize that this is a jurisdiction of the provinces, so it will be up to the provinces to consider next steps, if any, in this regard. We are looking towards seeing many landlords sign up for this, and I would like to just take this opportunity to encourage landlords to sign up for this, which not only gives them a sense of security, but also their tenants.
Back to Mr. Johns. Go ahead.
So that's a no. Then this government is still failing small businesses. If they can't make June rent, thousands will have to close permanently. If the government won't negotiate a moratorium, will they at least let tenants apply for the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program so they can get help on 50% of their rent?
The Honourable Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that we have clarity of understanding of jurisdictions. We have worked with the provinces in this regard. The federal government is working through the CMHC to provide support to landlords, which is conditional on their working with their tenants. But of course, it is a provincial area of jurisdiction. So any further actions, any decisions on restricting evictions is in the provincial jurisdiction and not one that the federal government is able to move forward on.
We'll now go to Ms. Gazan, Winnipeg Centre. Ms. Gazan, go ahead. Just have to unmute yourself there, Ms. Gazan. There you go, unmute the signal.
Mr. Chair, they talk about wanting to support small businesses, but their failure to make rent support work is putting businesses out of business. And when it comes to the rent for people's homes, this government didn't even try. Many people in my riding could not make rent on April 1st, May 1st, and June 1st is coming up. When will this government act to ensure that families and individuals make their rent payments?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for individuals, of course, we've worked hard to provide support. Over 8 million individuals are taking the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. For businesses, of course, we've put in place not only the business account for small businesses, but additional support through the wage subsidy program. We know that the rent approach is one that can have an important impact. I would encourage landlords to...
Point of order. I'd just like to remind my honourable colleague
just a
response is supposed to be the same length.
Just a moment, Ms. Gazan. Just a moment. Go ahead. Your point of order. Go ahead now.
Yes, I just wanted to remind my honourable colleague that his response is supposed to be within the same time period as the question that I asked. Just a friendly reminder.
That is accurate. In fact, the minister was just coming up to the same time that it took for your question. So I am monitoring that, and we will interrupt if one of the ministers responding goes more than just a short time over. In fact, we try to cut it off at the appropriate time, a word or two perhaps to finish a phrase, and that's the extent of it. But I'll watch that closely. The member can be assured. So let's go ahead then and finish up. Got about another minute and 20 seconds to finish up. Ms. Gazan, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Winnipeg Centre is the third poorest riding in the country, and COVID-19 has put many of my residents in my riding on the verge of homelessness. Instead of bailing out their corporate buddies, when will this government provide proper rental assistance so that families and individuals do not end up on the streets?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for the question. We have provided supports to families and individuals to maintain their ability to pay the rent. But in addition to that, we've provided over $157.5 million for homelessness all across Canada directly to community entities.
Ms. Gazan, about 40 seconds remaining. Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, adequate housing is a fundamental human right. Especially in this time of crisis, how can the government not show leadership and provide the support that people need to afford their home? Will this government provide support, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we've provided support to families and individuals to be able to have the ability to pay the rent and to pay for essential supplies and expenses. In addition to that, we have moved additional dollars in the amount of $157.5 million to the most vulnerable, including the homeless population in Canada.
We'll now go to Ms. Harder from Lethbridge. Ms. Harder, go ahead.
Thank you. As this pandemic began to spread, the government propagated China's talking points that human-to-human transmission wasn't possible. Now, I'm sure that the minister regrets those comments. Does she acknowledge that they were misleading?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite's continued lack of awareness of how science works is somewhat disconcerting. I'm sure she understands that this is a novel coronavirus that appeared on the scene in late December, and as the research community worldwide struggled to keep pace with understanding how the virus was adapting, the information changed. As such, our information changed.
I was simply wondering if the minister would like to do the honourable thing and acknowledge that that information was misleading.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, since the very beginning, we have been advising Canadians that they need to protect themselves from the novel coronavirus. We have taken strong measures as a country to do so.
And back to Ms. Harder.
Respect the professionals.
The minister also said that face masks weren't necessary, that they wouldn't help Canadians. Would she acknowledge that that was misleading?
Good question. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the party opposite has obviously not understood the way that research and science evolves, and the member opposite is propagating information that's misleading. She is the one that is confusing Canadians.
Health Minister misleading the Canadian public.
Mr. Speaker, as the evidence changed about the novel coronavirus, as our amazing researchers gave us new evidence, we adapted to adjust our advice to Canadians.
The Honourable Member.
Why is the minister not able to acknowledge that she fed the Canadian public misinformation?
Mr. Speaker, why is the member not able to understand that science evolves with new information?
The Honourable Member.
Back in January, when we started noticing other countries closing their borders in order to stop the spread of COVID-19, Conservatives asked this government if they would do the same. In response, the Prime Minister called us racist. Does the Prime Minister still consider those who called for the closure of borders racist?
Mr. Speaker, providing misleading information to Canadians is not appropriate. As the member opposite knows, we took strong measures at the border as recommended by the international health regulations. And Mr. Speaker, we were able to contain the virus for quite some time.
Honourable Member.
I could not agree with the minister more that providing misinformation is, in fact, incredibly wrong, which is why the government should simply apologize to the Canadian public for telling them that there was no emergency at our doorstep, that they didn't need to wear a face mask, that we didn't need to close our borders, that their human-to-human contact or contraction wasn't possible. Those are incredibly misleading statements. Why will the minister not just do the honourable thing and retract them and apologize to the Canadian public?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I maintain that the member opposite does not understand that as new evidence comes forward, in fact, new advice comes forward, and Canadians understand that. I'm unclear why she doesn't.
The Honourable Ms. Harder.
I understand that knowledge evolves. I'm just wondering if the minister will retract the statements that she made previously now that she understands that they are misleading.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I am so proud of Canadians for being able to adapt to new evidence and public health advice as it becomes clearer and clearer in terms of what kinds of actions could protect our health. I want to thank all Canadians for having the trust in the public health officials across this country.
Ms. Harder.
On February 3rd, Conservatives called on the government to treat this virus as a public health emergency and to take immediate action. Unfortunately, Minister Hajdu scolded Conservative MPs, stating that we were, and I quote, spreading misinformation and trying to sensationalize the risk of the virus. Would the minister like to apologize to the members opposite for that statement?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, very early on it was quite clear that there were members of our community that were stigmatized by misinformation that was floating around in various circles in the Canadian community. We took strong action to ensure those Canadians that we would be with them as we also fought the coronavirus in Canada.
Go back to Ms. Harder.
Would the minister like to retract her statement then that this side of the House somehow blew this up into something bigger than it is?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as early as January 2nd, Dr. Tam was convening members of the Canadian medical community to ensure that we would have a robust Canadian response to an issue of potential concern. We have taken this virus seriously every step of the way.
The Honourable Member, Ms. Harder, go ahead.
Truth, Mr. Speaker. While this government has told the Canadian public that the virus really wasn't something to be concerned about, that we didn't need to close down the borders, that face masks weren't necessary, they were misleading the Canadian public. Now they're crowning themselves as the arbiters of truth, spending millions of dollars to censor information that is and is not available online. Would the minister like to respond to why she is misleading the Canadian public and then crowning her head with the ability to monitor the information?
We're out of time. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank the incredible work of our public health officials and medical community in ensuring that Canadians have accurate information about how best to protect themselves. We continue to work with the community and Canadians, and together we have managed to flatten the curve to date. Thank you.
Now, I would ask the honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable, Mr. Berthold, to speak. Thank you very much, Chair. $1 million is a lot of money, and we could air condition long-term care homes. It could also provide a new fire hall. What is this Liberal government doing with $1 million? It's offering a yearly bonus to the president of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. Does the Minister of Infrastructure agree with the board of the bank that it is being particularly generous with taxpayers' money? The Honourable Minister. I'm very proud of what our government has done to invest in communities across the country. We're investing in infrastructure. We're building renewable energy, green infrastructure, public transit, including in the members' riding. So we're going to continue to do so. And I'm very proud that we decided to join the Infrastructure Bank, and we're going to continue our work. I go back to Mr. Berthold. Go ahead. Chair.
And how is it better to give $1 million in bonuses to the CEO of the Canada Infrastructure Bank than to invest in roads, schools, hospitals, and long-term care homes?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to explain to the member opposite that we actually are doing just that. Perhaps he isn't aware of our $33 billion infrastructure program, where we are working directly with the government of Quebec to build infrastructure that's making a huge difference, including projects in the members' riding. We're going to continue doing that.
Mr. Berthold. Chair, they're not answering my question. On April 3rd, the previous president of the Infrastructure Bank left his position for unnamed reason. How much did he receive in bonuses during his time as president of the bank? The Honourable Minister.
No.
Monsieur President.
Chair, the change in direction at the Infrastructure Bank is a new phase in the bank's development as we are trying to build public infrastructure that is modern and that creates jobs and makes Canada more competitive globally. Mr. Berthold, back to you. Chair, we're talking about bonuses offered to the president of the Infrastructure Bank. We don't know what the evaluation criteria that were used to establish that he deserved a performance bonus, even though almost no projects have been funded by this bank. The Honourable Minister.
Monsieur President.
Chair, I would like to thank the former President Pierre Lavallée for his contribution in creating this new institution. I'm very proud that we've had a new president. We're going to continue to work to build Canada and create new jobs. Mr. Berthold, how much did he receive in bonuses in total? The Honourable Minister. Chair, the president's bonus is set by the bank, and it is public information. Mr. Berthold, did the minister approve the bonuses that were paid to the president of the Infrastructure Bank? The Honourable Minister. Chair, as I've said, the president's bonus is set by the bank, and it is public knowledge. Mr. Berthold, if the new president stays in position for 5 years, he could have up to $4 million in bonuses in addition to the $3 million he receives in salaries. Does the minister believe this is a judicious use of taxpayer dollars? The Honourable Minister. Chair, we have to build our country. We're going to create good jobs, and we have to ensure that we have a greener future and invest in renewable energy and green infrastructure to create public transit. Mr. Berthold.
For 5 years, he will be entitled to a total potential bonus of $4 million, in addition of his salary of $3 million. Does the Minister of Infrastructure think that this is a good way to spend taxpayers' money? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister.
Oh, je m'excuse.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud that we have Michael Sabia, who's now head of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, the chair, the board chair. We need to move forward in building infrastructure that's going to create jobs, including in the members' riding, that is going to help move us to a cleaner future, that's going to grow our economy, that's going to increase Canada's competitiveness. The bank is a key part of the Investing in Canada plan.
We're now moving on to Ms. Gray, Kelowna Lake Country. Ms. Gray, go ahead.
Mr. Committee Chair, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown how important it is to be able to move our goods interprovincially. Kristen Buhagiar of Supply Chain Canada called for the government to revisit interprovincial trade regulations to ensure we can quickly move production and distribution from one region to another during times of emergency. Will the government commit to immediately examine all our trade barriers which can affect interprovincial trades of essential goods due to COVID-19?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the member opposite for her excellent point. Our government is very committed to removing barriers to interprovincial trade. It's something that we have been working on with the premiers. Obviously, the coronavirus has taken precedence in recent weeks, but it's a priority. It's the right thing to do.
Back to Ms. Gray.
Mr. Committee Chair, the federal government has a regulatory reconciliation table as part of the Canada Free Trade Agreement, focusing on breaking down interprovincial trade barriers. Due to COVID-19, it's been announced that deadlines for all of these items may be delayed. What is the government doing to ensure there won't be delays on these items?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think that it is absolutely right and appropriate for First Ministers who have been meeting every week for more than 2 months to be focusing on the urgent threat posed by coronavirus. But I agree with the member opposite that we need to lift barriers to interprovincial trade. That's something we're committed to doing and to working on with the premiers.
Ms. Gray.
Mr. Committee Chair, well, many of these items were past due prior to the pandemic. Two of the important items that should be worked on now from the list are meat inspection and food inspection. Considering serious issues from these industries during the pandemic, would the minister commit to restarting the work on at least these two items?
Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, je peux vous assurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When it comes to the Canada Food Inspection Agency, we're very open to this. The authorities are there. In case of a food shortage in one region or another of the country.
Chair, COVID-19 is adding huge pressures to our national supply chain. Those in the industry I speak with tell me they are beginning to see a backlog of goods. Does the government have a comprehensive plan to ensure the movement and resiliency of our national supply chain?
Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we talk about the food supply chain, we announced $50 million to buy food surpluses and redistribute them to our regions that need them most throughout our food bank network.
Mr. Committee Chair, reports state that the activist rail blockades earlier this year cost the Canadian economy $275 million, and it took 3 to 5 days to catch up for every day that our transportation network was down. The supply chain industry just caught up, and then the pandemic hit, creating new issues and backlogs. We are hearing from those in the industry who are concerned about future blockades affecting essential goods getting across the country. Our railways are critical infrastructure. Will the government commit to immediately dismantling any potential future blockades?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I couldn't agree more with my colleague that it is important for our railways to be transporting all the goods that we produce in this country, and I am in contact on a weekly basis with our major railways. I can tell you that there are certainly certain products that are moving very well at the moment, including grain, potash, and coal, but that there have been other goods that are not moving as quickly because they have been affected by the pandemic. But we are very vigilant with respect to moving our goods as efficiently as possible, whether it's by our railways, by trucks, or by ships.
To Ms. Gray.
Mr. Committee Chair, David Montpetit of Western Canadian Shippers Coalition stood at the Standing Committee of Industry this week and stated that they believe that shippers are going to face a container shortage over the next 6 months. He also stated we could be facing labor and capacity shortages in our trucking industry. This could backlog essential goods, including food and medicine, interprovincially if the capacity isn't there. What steps is the government taking to address this problem?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course, it's always important to have the capacity to move the goods that we move across this country. At the moment, our trains have the capacity to move goods across the country. With respect to trucking, we do have issues with respect to a lack of truckers to move some of our goods across the country. This is a problem that has existed for some time, and we're working on it.
We'll now move on to Ms. Wagenthal, Yorkton Melville. Ms. Wagenthal, go ahead.
Thank you, Committee Chair. Thank you very much. Young and new beef farmers are struggling as they don't have enough equity to build up to borrow money to survive these difficult times. Price insurance is key, but the premiums are so expensive due to COVID that they can't participate. Has a price insurance program been implemented in Atlantic Canada?
Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we encourage the use of private programs as well as other risk management programs. Personally, I can't answer the question directly.
Has the minister worked with her provincial counterparts to secure a short-term cost share agreement to reduce premiums where price insurance already exists?
Well, Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, je peux rassurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can assure my colleague that I work very regularly with all of my provincial colleagues. There's a meeting over the phone every week, as well as individual meetings.
Is cost sharing of premiums already available for crop insurance?
Well, Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've proposed to include the possibility of recognizing a labor shortage as an insurable risk, and it will be up to the provinces to adhere to it or not.
Price insurance, how many ranchers have had to address cash flow by selling cattle at the bottom of the markets?
The Honourable Minister.
There are many programs in place to help our beef producers, including $50 million through the Agri-Recovery Program, $77.5 million for food processors.
On May 1st, the Young Cattlemen's Council asked the minister to extend the deadline for attaining calf price insurance. Today is that deadline. Did the minister meet it?
Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, on est en conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're holding conversations just about every day with various representatives of organizations. We're trying to work with them to improve the different programs and to meet their needs, as well as manage the risk management programs.
So she didn't respond to the request of the Young Cattlemen's Council. The minister's telling farmers to access the BRM program, but even just now I got a text from a young cattleman in my riding who's losing $250 to $300 per head, who just told me that those programs in no way increase their capacity to deal with this crisis. The Farm Credit Canada lending capacity was increased by $5 billion, but only to service and manage loans of current customers. How many farmers have applied for that assistance?
The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a vast array of programs that are available to our producers, whether they be specific to the farming sector or the emergency business account, whose criteria has been broadened in order to offer more loans and a 25% non-refundable portion that could go up to $670 million for the agricultural sector.
Percentage of Canada's farmers are customers of Farm Credit Canada.
Well, Minister.
Monsieur le Président, les Farm Credit Canada, financement agricole.
Mr. Chair, Farm Credit Canada is available throughout the country and ready to meet the needs of our farmers.
To Ms. Wagenthal.
Thank you, Chair. Of the 25% of farmers who use FCC and have applied, how many have received assistance?
The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et je vais...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go with the last information I received. I believe it was $4 billion in flexible loans since the beginning of the crisis.
45 seconds left. Ms. Wagenthal, go ahead.
Is the minister concerned that cow-calf numbers will sharply decrease if producers aren't able to protect the value of their herds, which they cannot do, jeopardizing the future of the Canadian beef supply chain?
The Honourable Minister.
Monsieur le Président, je peux vous assurer que...
I can assure you that I am quite concerned by what's happening in the agri-food sector. That's why we're working extremely hard in cooperation with them to improve programs in place, to set up new programs, including to support the meat sector.
Clear that the BRM programs don't work and there is not funding in place to assist them. 3 weeks ago, the processing backlog was more than 100,000 head. How many beef operations are facing the real danger of going out of business because of this pandemic and the lack of support by the Ag Minister and this Liberal government?
Honourable Minister.
Monsieur le Président, encore une fois, les programmes...
Mr. Chair, once again, risk management programs are not perfect. We know that. That's why we're working with the provinces to find solutions. These are shared cost programs with the provinces, and we do want to improve them. That's why we've tried to introduce a certain amount of flexibility, and we're rounding out the funding, especially for the meat sector.
To Ms. Wilson-Raybould in Vancouver, Granville. Ms. Wilson-Raybould, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Minister of Employment has stated that measures would be forthcoming for individuals with disabilities, similar to the one-time payment increase given to seniors on OAS and GIS. Could the Minister please provide some more details with respect to the statement that she made, and when can individuals with disabilities expect meaningful financial assistance?
The Honourable Minister.
I thank the member for her question, Mr. Speaker. We know that Canadians with disabilities are disproportionately impacted by COVID, both in terms of their own personal health and the access to supports that they have or don't have, more specifically. Mr. Speaker, we are 3 days away from National Accessibility Week, the first week after we legislated it in the Accessible Canada Act, and I would expect something from our government during that week. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To Ms. Wilson-Raybould.
Thank you for that. My office has heard from many constituents who are frustrated over the lack of information on eligibility requirements from the government regarding business credit availability program. Furthermore, banks are giving small and medium-sized businesses mixed messaging. How will the government ensure that the messaging for BCAP and similar programs are articulated properly?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for her question. Nothing is more important to us right now than making sure that our small and medium-sized businesses are supported. The lending programs through BCAP is available through financial institutions, that's banks and credit unions across the country. The money is flowing to those businesses. I would encourage Canadian businesses to get in touch with their financial institutions. Thank you so much.
To Ms. Wilson-Raybould.
Thank you, Chair. Members may not be aware, but there are ongoing restrictions on when some civil servants can access government servers and their files due to the pandemic to ensure those dealing directly with the pandemic have priority. For example, this is affecting negotiations with Indigenous peoples. Can the government please tell us when the system will have sufficient capacity so that all civil servants can do their work remotely and without limitation?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the colleague for the question, the important question, which indeed speaks about the importance of public servants to continue their important job for Canadians, mindful, of course, of the difficult circumstances in which many of those workers find themselves, both personally and professionally. We know that, in particular, Indigenous communities need that support, particularly so in the context of the crisis, and we look forward to continuing to support them.
Back to Ms. Wilson-Raybould.
Thank you, Chair. As current and former parliamentarians call for a national inquiry into long-term care homes, something that I would strongly support, can the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations please give the members an idea as to when the action plan on murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls will be released? And in asking this question, I certainly understand the need for consultation and the reality of some delays due to the pandemic. There are, of course, many actions that we all know need to take place now and that do not need more consultation. The need for consultation cannot be an excuse for the lack of action.
Honourable Minister.
I thank the member for her question and for her ongoing advocacy that as we approach the first anniversary of the release of the final report, we are grateful for the work of all of our partners in really trying to do what they can to end this national tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited Plus. Despite the challenges of COVID-19, they have put in good initiatives, and we look forward to being able to release a national action plan, the first that will include all provinces and territories, as well as all of our Indigenous governments and partners.
Ms. Raybould, down to about the last 30 seconds or so, so a short question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A short question to the Minister of Transport. Does the government have any plans to step in and encourage airlines to return money to customers rather than vouchers? I've heard from many, many constituents and businesses in this regard.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned before, we're very sympathetic to the situation that those who would prefer to refund are in at the moment, but the airlines are going through an extremely difficult moment at this time, and if they had to reimburse at this time, some of them could fail.
We'll now go to Mr. Blakey in Elmwood, Transcona. Mr. Blakey, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I just want to begin by indicating I'll be splitting my time with the member for Skeena Bulkley Valley. across the country, there's a lot of Canadians preparing to go back to work right now. And there are some employers who are doing a good job of ensuring that there's a safe workplace with the right procedures and the right equipment. But unfortunately, there are some employers who are not. And for Canadians who are employed by those employers, that means a really tough decision about going back to a workplace where they don't feel safe and that they may present a threat to their families or to their communities, or staying home and worrying about not getting paid because they're not at work, and not being paid because they lose access to the CERB. So I'm wondering what guidance the federal government has for people who feel that their workplace is not a safe workplace at this time and that their employer hasn't done their due diligence, who are concerned about losing access to CERB.
The Honourable Minister.
I thank the member opposite for his question. Mr. Speaker, we are very concerned about the safety of our workplaces, and we don't want any worker to feel unsafe as they go back to work, but we do want people to go back to work, Mr. Speaker. We are working very closely with the provinces. The Minister of Health is working on occupational health and safety guidelines. The Minister of Labour is working with her colleagues. We are taking an all-of-government approach to ensure that workers are safe, that they don't have to put their lives or the health of their families in jeopardy, and that we can support them in these efforts.
And back to you, Mr. Blakey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the issue here is that Canadian workers really do need some certainty about what the federal government would consider an adequate employment offer, or an offer to come back to work, meaning that they wouldn't be on CERB. I mean, can Canadians be confident that they're just going to stay on CERB whether they go back to work or not, whether their employer offers or not? Or I think there's a lot of people who have anxiety about this, and it's a difficult time. So when is the government going to release some formal guidance on how people go about refusing unsafe work?
The Honourable Minister.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we know that provinces have their own individual workers' compensation and refusal to work mechanisms. But the point for us here in government, Mr. Speaker, is to work with employers, to work with provinces so that we make our workplaces safe.
But this is about CERB eligibility. So, I mean, I respect that.
No, order. No, we're out of time, Mr. Blakey. No, there's no. We run out of time based on the splitting the time to two different speakers. So we're now going to go to Mr. Bachrach, Skeena Bulkley Valley. Mr. Bachrach, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians depend on municipalities across Canada for vital services, especially during this pandemic. Services like transit and drinking water, parks and sanitation. And yet this government has left municipalities in an unprecedented financial crisis. Local government leaders across the country have called on this government for help, and yet mostly what we've heard is excuses. What I would like to know from the minister is, does she acknowledge that the federal government has a leadership role in getting financial help to municipalities at this difficult time?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much for that very important question. What we do acknowledge is the essential role municipalities play in our country at all times, and the particularly essential role that they play today as our country gets ready to restart our economy. We are working closely with the municipalities to talk about ways we can support them, and we are working closely with the provinces in whose jurisdiction the municipalities fall.
Mr. Bachrach, go ahead.
Through you to the minister, we've seen deep cuts, and more cuts are on the way. We've seen thousands of municipal workers laid off, and it's been over a month since municipal leaders called on this government for emergency financial relief. My question is a very simple one. When can municipalities expect the help that they need from this federal government?
The Honourable Minister.
Let me just say again, Mr. Speaker, that we are extremely alive to the importance of municipalities in our economy. We are very aware of the difficult financial situation in which they find themselves, and we are very aware of how important it is to keep our municipalities functioning, particularly as we move into the restart. We're working with municipalities, and we are urging them to work with their provinces as we are doing too.
We've got about 30 seconds left. Go ahead, Mr. Bachrach. 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A very simple question through to the minister. Are there emergency federal dollars on the table for Canada's cities? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, The federal government very much understands and appreciates the importance of municipalities. We are prepared to support them. Provinces need to do their share too.
Okay,
and now I would ask the honourable member for Manicouagan, Ms. Gill. Thank you once again. At a time when we're asking Quebecers to make sacrifices and to make more efforts, the Liberal Party and the government is taking a subsidy that should be for those in need and not for political parties that are millionaires at a time when the House's work is even more essential than ever because we should be doing more, like we're asking our people to do. The government has decided to suspend the House's work with the complicity of the NDP. And this, why? For an absurd deal that is impossible to keep. Can the government confirm to this House and at the same time to the NDP that this is not up to the government to give 10 days of sick leave? It's not their jurisdiction, so they cannot implement it. Thank you very much, Chair. The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Chair. In terms of the agreement, to have an agreement, you have to negotiate it. You have to sit at the table, and the Bloc wants to make gains for Quebec, but it has to be sitting at the table. And if you want to score a goal, you have to be on the ice. So how many people are sitting on the bench? The honourable member from Manicouagan. I'd like to take the puck because it's the government that decided to close the ice. The Parliament is the ice. That's where we score goals and we have teams. So when we play a sport, when you're on a team, when you're in a parliament, you still have to respect the rules. And the government made us a promise. They said, yes, of course, for the CERB for students. And the Deputy Prime Minister said, yes, of course, it's a good idea. And what did they do? They gave up. I play with a team that respects the rules and it keeps its word on this ice in this place. So I'd like to know if the government can tell us quite simply, because it's not its jurisdiction, it's not whether we're dealing with them or not, or whether they're keeping their word. I want them to tell people that it's absolutely not their jurisdiction and the NDP has not made a proper deal. Thank you, Chair. Chair, my colleague is making reference to previous deals, future deals, and we did make deals with the Bloc several times. Everything's always gone very well. But they weren't happy with something, so when you aren't happy, you shouldn't be pouting in the corner. You should be sitting at the table. Ms. Gill, thank you. I would like to remind the Honourable Government House Leader that I'm still on the ice, and the Bloc Québécois has principles. It respects its population, and an agreement is not a promise. It's something we have to respect. It's a question of dignity and sincerity and trust that is created. But when a player decides to not keep its word, I won't be stung twice. I prefer to make deals here in the House like we always do, not by trying to playing with someone who never keeps their word. So quite simply, Chair, I'd like him to tell us once again, the Government House Leader, that it's not up to him to decide these 10 days. He won't be able to offer them. Did he ask the Quebec government if it agreed with this measure? The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Chair. It's not up to me personally. I agree on that. It is up to many players, both the provinces and the private sector, and the federal government is discussing with them. And of course, we are having discussions with various players. But instead of having 4 hours of questions, now we have 6 hours. And we're talking about everything, not just COVID-19. And we're going to be back this summer instead of not seeing each other over the summer. So, Ms. Gill, inaudible. Inaudible for the interpreter. You have roughly 30 seconds, roughly 20 seconds, so that you can leave time for an answer. Ms. Gill, I'd like to remind the leader that there's 37 and a half for committees, and we're only getting roughly 8 or 9 hours a week. So once again, the leader said that it's not up to him. So he's making agreements with parties without being able to keep his word. So I hope the Honourable Minister, all of this, Chair, is up to decisions that the government makes, and we do have discussions with provinces. We did start these discussions, and I don't understand still how come she's against having more time here to ask questions. I would love to have an answer from her. Order. We are now going to pause quickly to change technicians. 1 minute.
Plusieurs secondes pour un changement.
We're just going to take a few seconds to make a change.
Okay. Order. I see the honourable member for Mr. Bazan on a point of order. Mr. Bazan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And earlier in during their question time here, Mr. Sweet, member for Flamborough-Glanbrook, got up and was raising a number of issues about the Hong Kong protests. 360 have been arrested. The People's Republic of China, the regime in Beijing, and their rubber stamp parliament, the National People's Congress, are circumventing Hong Kong legislation and the Hong Kong government in putting their own will upon the people of Hong Kong. I believe that this demands an emergency debate here in the House of Commons. I'm asking you, Mr. Chair, if you would rule that and schedule emergency debate so Parliament can actually discuss this crisis, this human rights crisis, as political protesters are being imprisoned because of them standing up against the communist regime in Beijing.
Thank the honourable member, Mr. Bazan, for his point of order. It really was more of a request. He may know, and for the benefit of other honourable members, of course, we're operating the Special Committee on COVID-19 under the auspices of an order made earlier this week. There is no provision in that order for emergency debates, but I would certainly encourage him to speak with his House Leader and whips and others. Of course, he'll know that discussions of this sort are being shared, and so he may want to pursue that opportunity. So I see Mr. Bazan rising. Is it a different point of order?
No,
Mr. Bazan.
To respond to that, if I could.
Well, there's no
say this, Mr. Chair, that this is the problem with this special committee, is that our rights and privileges as members have been completely degraded and makes it impossible for us to address the issues of
Mr. Bazan, we're all operating under an order that was agreed to by the House, and so we'll stick to those provisions. Again, I understand the situation we're in. Certainly, circumstances do change, but I leave that to the party leaders to decide. And now to our last round of questions, and then we're going to Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley. Mr. Morantz. Mr. Morantz, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are to the Minister of National Revenue. Minister, I've been informed by some of my colleagues that CRA officials have been directing constituents to phone their member of parliament to resolve CRA-related issues. Why on earth would CRA direct individuals away from the agency during this stressful time when they're just trying to get their tax information and file their taxes?
The Honourable Minister. Chair, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. That is very important. And I'd like to say that House employees do deal with questions that are brought forward. It's not up to members' offices to deal with specific issues that concern files of various constituents.
Well, the Minister, you didn't answer the question. This is your CRA officials directing constituents away from CRA. You really should be answering that question and not just talking about how inappropriate it is, although I appreciate that. Also, on your website, it says that the telephone service for the individual inquiries line will be available to Canadians until June 5th, and no further information about further live service. When will you get your agency under control and make sure they provide an actual person on the other end of the line to provide the information that taxpayers need?
Just before we go to the Minister, a reminder to honourable members to address their questions through the chair. So it's a little bit different than when we're questioning witnesses in committee. We're using the rules more related to what we use in Committee of the Whole. So now we'll go to the Minister. L'Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, okay. Point of order, Mr. Grants. Go ahead.
As far as I'm aware, this is not Parliament. This is a committee. I've been sitting on committee since October. I've talked to my colleagues, and no chair, including the chair of the Finance Committee, has ever asked me to address a question through the chair. So with the greatest of respect, unless this is in fact Parliament, which I'm told it's not, and the Parliament voted that it's not, we really should be able to address the witnesses directly, should we not?
Thank you, Mr. Morantz. This really is a question around the way in which the Special Committee on COVID-19 has been structured. We're operating under the rules that were agreed to by the House in an order that was passed and adopted on Tuesday of this week. So we're bound to manage the affairs of this committee in that way. And one of those includes asking members to address their comments and questions through the chair to other honourable members. So I ask you to abide by the rules of the committee, and we'll pursue that. I'll ask now, we'll go to the response to your first question. L'Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Your second question. The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to thank the public servants who've done excellent work during this historic period of COVID-19. Call centers of the CRA are an essential service, and the agency is able to answer the calls quickly, Chair. And the employees answer calls from their homes, Chair.
Let's go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of my colleagues have spoken to CRA about drop-off boxes for paper returns actually being removed at some locations, citing COVID-19 as a reason. Has CRA removed these boxes at all locations? And given this, will you commit today to make paper filing postage-free so paper filers can no longer drop off their returns at all of the locations?
La Ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Chair, I'd like to thank my colleague for his important question. In terms of the CRA, we continue to take paper returns. We're continuing to do our work that we usually do. And I'd like to remind everyone about the exceptional work that has been done by our employees of the CRA. Thank you.
Morantz, go ahead.
Well, on the subject of paper returns, there have been numerous reports. In fact, I asked you on May 10th for a written response at the AGO committee, which I've not yet received yet, on the delays in processing paper returns. And apparently this is still ongoing. When will Canadians who file paper forms have their returns processed so they can get the refunds they need during this difficult time?
La Ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Chair, I can confirm that the CRA continues to process paper returns. I do recognize that because of COVID-19 and to offer employees protection, we've had to establish distancing measures to ensure the security of our employees, and we continue to process paper returns.
45 seconds or so left. Go ahead. Put your question.
Sure, Mr. Chair. During this crisis, the problem of illegal tax evasion and avoidance has been highlighted. The minister has been the minister, Mr. Chair, since 2015 and should be able to answer this question really off the top of her head. How many successful prosecutions have there been for the illegal use of tax havens in Canada?
The Honourable Minister. Chair, as we said, we've invested, and it's a priority for our government, we've invested almost $1 billion to establish a system to fight tax evasion, which wasn't at all a priority under the Conservatives, Chair. So we continue to do this important work for our taxpayers, and everyone has to pay their fair share. That concludes this meeting of our special committee.
I'll just go in English. I can't have that background echo. This will conclude our 13th meeting of the special committee. Speaker Rhoda asked me to remind all honourable members that during the next meeting, which will be next Monday, that we'll be watching more carefully the time for members' statements. We're allowed 1 minute. And of course, members that are providing those by virtual session, virtual conference, if they could just time those declarations, members' statements to within the 1 minute, he will start to cut off if the member goes beyond that 1 minute. And with that, this committee stands adjourned until Monday at noon. Enjoy the weekend. Thank you.